Welcome to another Jobs for Football interview. Today we're joined by former Manchester United, Bury, Nottingham Forest, Ipswich player David Johnson. Thanks for joining us, David.
No problem, evening.
You started your career at Manchester United as a YTS player with a pretty famous bunch of lads.
Yeah, they were a year older than I was. They were the class of 92. We were the forgotten class of 93, as I tell everyone. So yeah, when I joined, back then there were trials, you played for your county. It was just completely different. So I went up probably twice in a year, maybe 2 years, from the day I signed at 15 to when I joined. So I didn't know anyone. And the lads that whenever I went up and played at half term or whenever it was, they were like Manchester lads, trialist or whatever. It was like just games. So the day I joined, it's like the first time I'd actually probably met a lot of the boys. And then obviously I went in and we trained together. It was like an A and a B team. So considering it was like a youth team, you were completely separate. So I can remember going in and these lads were a year above, and I was just like, wow, they haven't just got one or two players. They had probably 13 top players at the time. And it was a graft. It was hard work because they were the benchmark. And we played them every Thursday, 11v11. You know, by half time, 40 minutes, Eric Harrison blown the whistle and said, it's enough. We were 11-0 down. They were just unbelievable. And it was a hard learning curve because you always look when you're trying to play football, who's in front of you, X, Y, and Z. And when you've just got a team, and I mean the whole team that was in front of you, it just made you think, I'm not going to make it here. Things would have to change. And the year that I joined, Man United won the league the first time, and then they turned into this powerhouse that they ended up being. And it was a great experience. Fantastic coaches. Eric Harrison, widely renowned as one of the best youth coaches that we've ever had in this country, and disciplinarian. And he just taught you the basics very, very well. And we did most training sessions exactly the same from a warm up to before we went into games. And it was just the basics on receiving the ball, how to pass the ball, and to play with freedom, express yourself. But you had to work hard. And, that installed in, a lot of the players, I would say from the class of 92 downwards, that all went on and had, decent careers. But yeah, it was a great learning curve, but, it was tough because we had fantastic players in front of us.
Did you find that pretty daunting at the level when you first saw them play?
No, you just hope you got in the team. You were like, if I can get in that team. It was never about the first team. It was like, if I can get in their team, this is going to be great. So it was, listen, I think it helped you, but sometimes it was very difficult because you never really got a game in the A team. And then when they moved on to reserves, as you recalled it, a lot of them, so like Nicky Butt was an early developer, Ben Thornley, Keith Gillespie, they were the three. Gary, I think, got thrust into the first team and played one or two games. And then you couldn't get into 23. So when we became like the A team and stuff, we did very well, and we didn't realise that we could be doing very well. And then we ended up winning the Youth Cup, a year and something later. But like you said, I think it put us into good stead because their standard, and apart from obviously Leeds, who had a fantastic youth team, they were the two best youth teams in the country. And to watch that Youth Cup final in front of 45,000, and then when we played down at Spurs in front of 15,000, drew, and then beat them at Old Trafford in front of 45,000. United and how they looked at their youth, followed through, and I think it sort of started putting youth football on the map again. To have 45,000 at a youth game was just, I don't think the record's been beaten ever since. So,
no.
It was a special time.
And then you ruptured your ACL.
Yeah, I was I went away with England and did my ACL, and at the time everyone thought that's it, your career's finished. Alan Shearer, I think, did his the week before, and we were in the same hospital. Obviously, we had same injury. We did our rehabs at Lilleshall as well, and with surgeries and moving on, it basically strengthened your knee at the time. But it took me obviously a lot longer to establish myself and to move forward. I wasn't the most professional at the time, but you look at Alan Shearer then, everyone said he'd be finished, and then he went on to score another 200 something goals. So he
did all right.
Yeah, he did all right. So those type of injuries back then, you were sort of like done. So it didn't help me, but I think it just put me back a little bit, into my fledglings career as such.
Do you think that had any effect moving forward at United?
No, it was all down to me. I came back from the injury. I was overweight. I got in the first team, but I was never consistent. I came from a small town in Shropshire, near Lilleshall. I was from Newport, and to go to a big city, I spent most Friday, Saturday nights in Royale. I think at that stage, I just thought it was going to happen. And that was my worst act, at the time. I was silly, immature. I didn't really have any parents around me to say, listen, this is what you need to be a footballer. I was sort of left on my own. The club were brilliant, but I was pig-headed, never had that family to say, listen, do you want to be a footballer or not? And it held me back. And, a year later, I ended up moving on.
You were named on the bench in the first team in the Champions League. Did that not give you a sort of push that you needed to sort of say, wow?
I think it probably was the worst bit, because, I got on the bench with a few of the lads, and, the bonus came in your wage pack, and I was like, I'm rich, and spent it in nightclubs and on clothes, and, it wasn't probably the ideal thing to do, but, that should have been the kick up the backside. And the reality is that this is how close you are. If you do well, you'll get rewarded, and unfortunately it wasn't what happened.
And then you were released and ultimately joined Bury.
Yeah.
How did it feel when you were released?
It wasn't a problem to me, because I didn't deserve a contract. So when I went in to see the manager, he just said to me, he said, listen, Eric doesn't want to let you go. He says, I will. He says, but if you come back in pre-season and lose all that weight and be more professional, you can come back. And I walked out the door and I was like, right, I'm off. And Gary and Phil pulled me and just said, listen, do you want to go and play for Bury? My dad's up the road. So I went and met Mr. Neville, brought me a can of Coke and a sandwich, and the deal was done, and that was it.
That easy.
Yeah.
But Bury, you did really well. I think you're probably one of the first players I remember sort of dropping down a few leagues and really kicking on.
I went into Bury still overweight. I think Mike Walsh was the manager at the time, and they just missed out on the playoffs. So I joined, and they had a slow start. So he got sacked, and Stan came in. I wasn't involved. Stan came in and just said, listen, you need to lose a stone or you're not going to get my team. And I'm thinking, the same people keep telling me the same thing. So I went home with my wife at the time, and I just started buying food that had no fat in, eating pasta, going to the gym after I finished training. And as you can imagine, the weight just dropped off me. And he stood by his word, and I think it was in October, November. He gave me an opportunity, and I think I scored on my debut. I think it was something like that. And then once you've had a taste of first team football in front of 3,000, not 30, it was what I dreamt of. And then so I already knew now I had to keep my weight down to become a professional footballer, and then it just ingrained in me really from there. But it wasn't a shock as much as people would have thought, because once you're a first team player at Man United, you get treated like a superstar. But I wasn't that. So I was just a normal 23 player. So when I went to Bury, the only big difference is you had to take your own kit home, own food, all that type of stuff. So that was probably the difference. There was no pre-match. It was soup and sandwiches on the bus. Some of the lads were smoking on the way trips. That's what it was like. So it was the norm to me. And then Stan helped me and helped me shaped into the player I went on to be.
They had a really good team at the time, didn't they? Got back-to-back promotions and had like Dean Kiley at the time, I think.
Yeah, Paul Butler, Chris Luchetti,
Lenny John Rose.
Yeah, we had a front line full of thugs. So we had Ronnie Jepson, Mark Carter obviously wasn't, but he was our goal scorer. Ronnie Jepson and
Pugh at the time, was it?
Pugh was on the left wing. He was a Scouser, Gary Brabham.
Oh yeah,
and Peter Swan. So that was our front line. And every time we came out in the tunnel, they'd just threaten them, and the elbows and stuff from set pieces. And if anyone ever, came through the back of me and I went down, that was it. It was just a full-on war, and people never wanted to mess with Peter Swan. He was hard as nails, and Gary Brabham was. So we had that. We were like Wimbledon at the time. Just put fear into every team. We worked hard. We got it forward. Lenny would throw it in from the halfway line. We just won second balls. It wasn't pretty to watch, but we were successful at it. And a lot of teams obviously played like that. But we got promotion out of that, the fourth division at the time. And I think the momentum when we went into the next level just kept going. And they were the two best years of team camaraderie I've ever been in, because some of the stuff we went to pre-season, my second pre-season, we went to Anglesey, to the army barracks. So it was on the Thursday and said, right, we're going to go here for 4 days, train with the army, etc., etc. Phil Stantz used to be in the army. He was buzzing. So we're thinking, this is going to be awful. So the lads are going, listen, Anglesey's in Wales. We're not driving. You get a coach. There's no coach. We'll give you £5 petrol money. It was 400 miles away. So all the lads were sharing the cars. So we drove down there, had a car full of lads. And I had 3 lads in the back of mine. They had the boots, a few underpants, a few socks, and my car was full of beer. And I was thinking, we're on pre-season. So we got down there, all the other lads are there, turn around, Stan hasn't turned up yet, Spike, all of them drinking cans at the side of the pitch. And I'm thinking, Jesus, this is pre-season. So we had the first game, Stan was fuming. So we had a game in the afternoon. A few of the lads had some beers. And I can remember a lad called John Paskin. He was like a South African lad. And he was huge. And he'd rolled his shorts up in his slips and rolled his short sleeves over his arms. And the captain stands there going, Pask, I told you, get on the left side. And he's turning around and he says, but the sun's not on that side. I want to get a tan gaffer. All right, you stay on that side. And it was just the banter and stuff. It was just brilliant. So, they're a great group of lads. And like I said, we ended up getting promoted back to back.
Did you leave after that second promotion?
Yeah, so we got promoted to the Championship at the time, or second division as it was. And the team started changing. Stan wanted to play football, so he brought in Andy Gray and a few other players. And we started off the season really well. I think we were 8th at the time. We'd gone to Wolves, beat Forest, beat Sheffield United that I'd scored in the games. Drew against Wolves, beat Man City. I scored in that when they had Georgie Kinklatz, who was probably one of their greatest ever players. He was just a magician. And we beat them. And back then there was no transfer window. So I think it was October, the manager rang me when about 9 o'clock at night, Mrs. answered the phone. She goes, the gaffer's on the phone. I'm thinking, oh, what have I done now? And he just said, listen, son, you've been sold. And I'm like, brilliant. Where to? And he said, Ipswich. And I'm thinking, the third from bottom. He said, they're putting a bid, 1.3 million. He said, we can't turn it down. And I've gone, all right, put the phone down. I said, I've just been sold. We're going to Ipswich. And she goes, all right, where's Ipswich? I said, I don't know. So I went in the car. So we got a map out. So it's me and my missus, and I've got a 9-month-old. We sat down thinking, right, how are we going to get down to Ipswich? It's middle of the night. Took us I think it took us 5 and a bit hours to get down there. Got into the hotel, woke up the next day and thinking, what on earth have I done? Went and signed, did everything, and I hit the floor running, at that club as well. So it was a strange way, because we never had an agent at the time, but it just came out the blue. But if I look back now and, like most players, and they know stuff about other teams and where they are, someone would go, oh, I'm not going down there, it's too far away from the family. But I just saw it as another challenge. Right, we're off, let's go. And it was probably the best decision I made.
Could you have said no if you didn't want to go?
Yeah, they wanted the player out of it. I was on, I think, 200 and I got a pay rise. I think I went on to something like 400, and they quadrupled the salary. It was like life changing. I went from a 2-bedroom house to a 4-bedroom house, and I could put up savings and stuff like that. So financially, it changed my life, but so did the football. But I never thought of saying no, and I never had an option to go to another club. I think Sheffield United and a few of the clubs, Wolves, had come in, but wouldn't put up the money. So I went to Ipswich, and like I said, it was a great move.
You scored 10 goals in 18 games when you first joined. I mean, did you get promoted that season, or was that?
No, we had 3 years of trying. So when I joined, I think we were third from bottom, and we went on a run of 21 games unbeaten at Ipswich. And I think I scored 10 goals in the first 10, 15 games. And I was still top goal scorer at Bury with 10 goals as well. And confidence was very high. Obviously, I went on and scored 30 odd goals. But the style of football Ipswich played really helped, because I wasn't chasing lost balls and big balls into the corner. And I adapted back to how Man United would have played, and just went back in that role. And you remember back then, it was either big striker, small striker. Every club had it. Probably the two of the best. Quinn and Phillips, used to look up to them, thought they're amazing. And we had with Scowcroft and myself, and we went on to do very well. But we were a young team. We always used to get bullied against Boltons, Sheffield United, your Birminghams, and we lost out on 3 playoff games. Charlton that one year, the year that they missed out to Sunderland, and it was the third time of asking. And I'm sure you probably remember the playoff against Bolton was just magical, and we got promoted that year against Barnsley. So it took 3 years to get promoted to the Premier League.
And how did you adapt to the Premier League?
I was again poorly. I just, I was number 9 striker. The manager went, me, Marcus Stewart, I think he can play together. He was a super intelligent footballer, like a false 9-10. And I came back pre-season, okay, nothing special. And unfortunately enough, the first 3 games we hadn't won. Tottenham was the first game away. Played Man United. I played really well in that one. We drew 1-1. And Aston Villa at home, I didn't do that well. So he put Marcus Stewart in, and the season changed. They went on to win, I think, 20 out of 30 games. Smashed them, and Marcus Stewart scored 20 goals that year, and I was out of the team. And it was frustrating as such, but I had nothing but respect for him, the club, you know, it was just one of those things that when they changed the system around, it worked. And I do believe, even till now, that if we'd have carried on probably one or two more games, it would have changed my look, but it didn't. And so me being me, I thought, right, I'm not going to get in this team. So I moved on again.
And that was to Forest for 3.5 million. Which I think it's probably quite a lot of money back then.
Yeah, so I think at the time, 3.5 million was the transfer record in the Championship. I think the lad, Lee Bradbury, went to Man City. Yeah, he broke it, I think, a year or something later. I think he went to Man City for 4 million or 5. John Macken then went to 5 million. So it was like big money back then. And Forest had obviously just come out of the Premier League, and that's where things just went from downhill, really. You know, I wasn't fit. I wasn't match fit. Manager got sacked. New manager came in. The ITV digital money went out the game. Then they had to sell all the big players. So I had to go out on loan. And it was just one thing after another. And then Paul Hart came in, and they couldn't sell me. And I wasn't going to move either. And he got the best out of me there. So it was just another one of those stories that, you know, if they built the team around me, eventually, you know, I scored goals. And I think I scored 30 odd goals in that year. We missed out in the playoffs. But it was a frustrating time at Forest because it's a fantastic club. Great city. We still live here now. I just wished I could have probably shown a little bit more if I'd have stayed fit, but I broke my leg, did my back, one thing after another, and then, you know, I retired. I think, you know, my last game was at 27, but I officially retired at 30. But, you know, it was a really frustrating time there.
If I remember rightly, you had quite a lot of problems with your back on and off.
Oh, it was just non-stop. Because my knees were knackered, then I'd get back pain, and then trying to manage everything, and then I had to have my discs popped, and then I had to have an operation, and the wear and tear of everything in my body. I just couldn't function, couldn't really train more than 1 or 2 days more a week. And the pre-season, the year when Forest got relegated, I tried to do pre-season running and stuff, and the physio just pulled me, said, you know, you need to stop. So I went and seen a specialist, and he just said, listen, if you carry on, you'll be in a wheelchair. So I said, that'll do me, thanks very much, and I'm off. So that was done.
And then obviously your lads at Forest now.
Yeah.
And unlucky last night.
Yeah, it was. So we ended up staying in Nottingham, you know, with the family and things, and he ended up going into that academy route that I wouldn't say I was against. It was at first, I think he was like under 9s, under 10s. You know, a lot of the team that he played for joined, and you know, he's gone from under 9s all the way through, and then probably in the last 2 years or 3 years, he's really kicked on, and you know, with his development. And we all talk about this and what's right and what's wrong with young players playing in the 23s, or is it better going out on loan? And, you know, my intention was he needs to play men's football as soon as his availability. And, you know, he's been very fortunate. He's gone to a team that play, well, most of the teams in that level do now, apart from 2, play the right way, and he's enjoying his time. And it's great to see him developing into, you know, what I hope to be, you know, a very good player, and he's enjoying it, and you know, he's ticking the boxes, traveling back and forth, being with a new environment, because all these types of things, you know, you see everywhere. These top young players go on loan and struggle. Different manager, doesn't work out for them. The manager gets sacked halfway through. And if you told me that Harry Kane was going to be probably one of the best strikers in the world after his 4th loan, and, you know, Norwich didn't work for him, Millwall, he did okay. Leicester, he never played. And then you're thinking, it must work, but sometimes it takes a lot longer to others. Like Andrew Townsend, I think he had 7 or 11 altogether. And I just think now with these younger players that they hit a plateau of this 23s football, and then what's next? And I've been in that situation where I'm looking for clubs, for players, and agents would ring me and would go, I said, no, don't think it's good enough, not my opinion. So when I started ringing around for clubs for my son, and, you know, this was last year, some were like, oh, no, don't think he's ready. We don't take first loans. And I mean, I rang every single club. And then he goes on this year, and then I get the Texas stuff. I wish we'd have taken him. And I'm like, and, you know, and that's what it's like. And
it's all about
yeah, but it's frustrating because, you know, you'll go to games and you think to yourself, I like that kid. I think he could do really well. And then you don't know them, and then they come into that environment, and it's sink or swim, and they don't have the time, the manager, to, I wouldn't say develop them, but to give them that opportunity to say, right, it's going to be 6 games and then you're going to get in, etc., etc. Their job could be gone after 4 or 5 games. So, you know, you have to hit that floor, you know, really quickly, try and break into the team. And we see it all the time. And then, you know, us scouts or analysts, we can't work out why he hasn't settled, but we don't know the boys personally, and we don't know what the manager thinks. So it was a big plus for me that, you know, he's played 20 odd games and, you know, he's doing okay.
How much involvement do you have in his career? Is it difficult in what you've seen and pitfalls?
I'd say probably his mum has more involvement. We, you know, before games, he goes away and I'll just say text. We'll just say, you know, good luck. I don't try and go too in depth of, you know, what I think he should do, or, you know, I do say to him after the game, you know, I thought you did well today, etc., when things haven't gone well. So like last night, you know, I just said, great run. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough on the night. You did right with your penalty. Just focus Saturday now, Wigan away, and just those 3 things, and then it's done. We don't talk about it again. That's it.
Best way.
Yeah. There's 20 other people on the pitch that influences the game more than what I could. He's got a manager and coaches. So it's, for me, it's probably, I think it's the right way. Yeah, I get frustrated watching him, and, you know, I shout and scream from here. But when the game's finished, that's it, done.
Control.
Yeah, but you've probably been on the sideline and you've probably heard stuff, and you just think to yourself, this is the problem. Yeah. This is the problem. And, you know, I bite my lip at times, and, you know, sometimes I want to throttle other parents. Yeah, cannot talk to them like that. But we're all different. So it's a bugbear of mine, because some people focus, that's it, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, and some of the advice they get is just awful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't realise you'd left scouting.
Yeah, so I left around about 3 years ago. So I was at Chelsea for like 4 years. Unbelievable football club. Fantastic recruitment department. You know, most people say it's easy working for Chelsea. The hardest thing about working for Chelsea is trying to keep the shit out, you know. So, you know, my first year or so, you know, I came in, and like Dele Alli, playing for MK Dons, we'd all went to watch him, and etc., etc. He then goes to Tottenham. The first question to ever, why didn't we sign him? And we're like, we had Ruben Loftus-Cheek, we've got Lewis Baker, etc., etc., plus what's in front of him. And then he has them 2 unbelievable first seasons. and they're still saying, well, we believe our young players are just as good, but they're getting he's getting more game time. So that's what it's like working at a club at that level. And then I got offered like a promotion, but it was still in the youth, and I've still got a great relationship with Jimmy and Neil Bath. And then I went to Leicester, and it was a year like then they won the Premier League, and I learned a lot more on the other side with Steve Walsh. I think there were like 6 of us covering the whole of Europe, and it was just, I was away for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 days, come back, drop my stuff off again. And my son was obviously just just coming to apprentice. And, you know, I was traveling around Europe everywhere, and I hadn't watched him play 6 months, twice in a year. And then he got called up with England. And then I just thought, it's a young man's game, or the old man that you see on the sideline that everyone's seen because they've been retired and they do it as a full-time job. All these young, enthusiastic young lads that with no real footballing background, these analysts, amazing. So when you put these scouts who've done it for 30 years and then you give them these analysts to work with. When I went to Leicester, I had this list of all these players, and they were going, "Oh, this is brilliant, etc., etc." And then, you know, Claudio was like, "Right, I only want this type of player, etc., etc." This analyst went, "Right, there you go. These are the players we're looking at because they run this, they do that, they sex, etc." So my list went from there down to there. I had 10 players to look at. I'd go and watch these 10 players consistently for a bit, came back, and it was like, that's how they work at Leicester. And you go in, this analytic side's moving so much into the games because it saves on flights, watching, all that type of stuff. You can do a lot more on video. That's the bit that I don't like, but you just get a better rounder picture, and it's working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
That was the last time. And then after that, when Steve Walsh left, they brought some new guys. I really got on with them, but I just thought, you know, I wanted to watch my son play, and they were fine with it. So I ended up, you know, going into working with David and doing different things. So yeah, but I still do the same type of thing, go to games, watch a lot on videos, etc. And then now I'm trying to help Phil, and it's an eye-opener. How
was it structured at Chelsea then? Because obviously they've got a massive network.
So there was 2 departments. Scott McLaughlin that ran the men's, as you'd say. He was like head of international scouting. So they would do all the first team. But like Chelsea and most clubs, it's trying to get blood out of a stone. So I would go to a game in England, and then they said, "Jono, Champions League week, something. Can you go and watch Leon under 19s, watch the first team in the evening, the Europa League was on the Thursday, go and watch Montpellier, yeah, no problem. Then the French League kicks on again. Can you go and watch Monaco on a Friday, Nantes plays Saturday, and then you can go and watch Paris Saint-Germain on the Sunday." So as they play in Europe, they will play the 19s in the morning, and then they'll go and play the first team in the afternoon. So I was watching 2 or 3 games. So I think I went to France, I think it was like for 10 days, and I watched 70% of the league.
Right.
So that's how they worked, you know, at Chelsea. Where Leicester, it was working smarter. It was literally, right, if you really want to go to that game, Jono, no problem. Just go and do what you do. But that's the player we need to see. And then can you fly to Sweden and do that one? So they were 2 different types of work ethic, but I would have said that Leicester work smarter on their budget. But now I speak to them, they've got a lot more people involved, a lot more analysts. And Chelsea have moved to that way as well, have a lot more analysts. They used to have 30 scouts just in London. So, you know, worldwide, they had them in every country. Italy was probably the only country that, from what I know, that not many clubs really had a dedicated scouting because Italians didn't like travelling. Their youth were different. That you look at the Italian league, apart from one or two, everything was mature players. You go to Italy at 28, you can still play at 38. So that was a market that we probably kept away from. But yeah, it was two different styles. But I think the Chelsea obviously caught up, but they were very contrasting, and it worked.
Do you think it probably helped them get a player over the line easier at Leicester because they'd done that analytical side?
Not really. So they were more cautious with their money. There was none of this. There was none of this waiting for them to develop, put them in for years, go and get a feeder club, etc. So the year that they won the league, I turned around to John Rudkin and the coaches and I said, listen, I says, we don't have enough players. What do you mean? What do you mean? I says, well, there's the first team. He goes, yeah, brilliant. I says, you've got to put in a team for the Champions League. I said, you've got the Reserve League, you've got the FA Cup, you've got the FA Youth Cup. And they were like, oh my God. And they just weren't prepared for that. So they started getting a lot of players and stuff like this. And, the first player, you can ask anyone, that I said to them, go and take James Justin. At Leicester, he was at Luton at the time. I'd watched him in the FA Youth Cup. They probably had two other players as well. I said, go and get that kid. So at the end of the season, we were looking to, players. And I said, this lad. And they said, well, we've got Danny Simpson, then we've got something coming through. We've got Ben Chilwell, a young lad. They would have Fuchs. He said, Jono, we don't think he, would get in our team now. He was going to cost $1.5 million. And within a year, they ended up paying $6 million for him. So that's how they worked, because they wanted the right player to go straight into the first team. And then as they moved with the times and stuff, they brought some younger top talent and etc. But literally, Leicester is that one player that between the age that he's ready, near enough to go bang straight in the first team. Where at Chelsea, it was like, don't worry, we'll take him in, we'll send him out on loan, we'll do this, etc., etc. His value will go up, and then he might get in the first team. So it was two different contrasting styles, but they work for both clubs.
Were Mahrez and Kante already there when you joined them?
No, they already, Mahrez had. Kante was my first day, but he was there on my first day. And, I'm sure you've heard the stories that Claudio just looked at him and went, what on earth have you lot done? He's a midget, he's this, he's that. And then I think he came into John Rudkin after the first training session and went, I've got myself a player here. And it was that type of club because he trusted the scouting department.
Yeah.
Solely. He would bring in one or two of his own that he wanted, that he thought was fine. But he trusted the scouting department. After training, he would go in and they said, boss, listen, we're looking at this lad for January, etc., etc. He would have a look and he went, I quite like him, etc. And then he would trust the department solely. So it was great being really close with a manager and the recruitment side. And
now you're with Inter Miami?
Well, not as such, like I said, David's my boss. So I do all sorts working with him, from documentaries, commercial things, footballing, So my job's evolved. So when I went into Miami, started, it was that question. They'd always say to me, what do you think of this player? And I said, give me 5 minutes. I'd go on my laptop and look at reports, or I'd ring people in the game, usually Jim or other people at the clubs, and said, let me get a report on them so you'll have some background. But, I think at first they trusted the director of football, then they brought a manager in, and it just didn't gel. So when they changed things, David wanted a lot more involvement in. And obviously with the COVID, he couldn't fly out there, but now he has more hands-on They've changed the recruitment side, got a new manager in. So I speak to Phil 5, 6, 7 times a day. And, just with all our football knowledge and the people who we know, we do what we should have done last year, and to make sure we're getting the right characters. Phil wants to play a certain way, so there's no point playing a high pressing game like Liverpool when players can't cover the ground. So we've got a new analyst team, and it's just the basics. And I'm always a big believer, because I've come from that side, and I said, you're only as good as your players, and that is still my belief. You are only as good as the players you recruit. And I think the recruitment side of the game is so important, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and it's probably the only unprofessional side of the game. I still think that, how do you make somebody qualify? If you're a lover of the game just as much as I am, you'll probably know just as much as I do. So doing these courses and stuff is probably rightly to tick boxes, but you've got all these people who've been around in the 60s and 70s with 30, 40 years of football knowledge, of watching these players, and you put good people in a room and it just works.
What you were saying about, obviously, MLS, it's a league that I've seen evolve over the 25 years. My father was actually one of the first with Sunil Gulati in 1996. He's helped set up. It was himself, Dave Sarakin, Bruce Arena, Renus Michaels.
Yeah, Bruce Arena, the legend it is. Yeah. So they were actually at the first ever combine to select the Brian McBrides, the Tom Dooleys, the Violas. Yeah. So from where it was to now, the animal that it is, and evolving, it's something that it's absolutely unbelievable what it is actually turning into. Yeah, and for me, I'm probably the same mindset on that recruitment, is that I'm looking at them and going, so 17 players from America are playing in Europe, all under 21.
Yeah.
It is the golden place to recruit players from at the minute. So 20 years ago, when your old man was there, everyone said the same thing. If this takes off, this league, it could be huge. Or if football takes off in the MLS, can you imagine what type of players they would produce? Yeah. And it's taken 17 years. And, fortunately for me, Brennan played against the American national team, apart from one player, they're all under 22, 23, 18-year-olds. And for me to watch the quality and to see all these top young lads on the MLS playing in Europe, a lot of them obviously in Germany and different countries, you think, okay, the penny's dropped over there now, but why can't they keep them? And the MLS is just like the League One and Championship, they're all selling clubs, and they make their money and do. But I think they're getting it right, and every window now for the last 2, if there's not 3 or 4 top States lads going into to Germany or wherever, it just shows you that they believe in football now. They're getting better coaches. I'm not saying that the MLS itself is their priority, because it's obviously not. It's playing in Europe. So they're getting it right, and all of a sudden, these names are on the tips of our tongues. Yeah. Talking, and we're seeing them more regularly at, Champions League nights and, in the Premier League. So, when Brian McBride came over and, the keeper at Man United, we're all going, are we sure? But all of a sudden now, we could probably name 20 players. I know a lot of them have dual passports, but they could be a force to be reckoned with in, another 4 years.
Yeah. Yep. Agree.
That's brilliant. Thanks a lot for that, David. Some really good information. We'll be watching what Inter Miami get up to.
Yeah. Hopefully get a few players over the line before the summer.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.